Well, as you can see, I'm about to plant out my tomato plants. That's the outdoor tomato plants. The indoor ones have already been planted some time ago, as you've seen in a previous video, and moving along quite nicely. They're actually just approaching their first buds coming out now. The interesting thing is to see that these plants here are the same varieties and were grown at the same time as the plants that I have started in the greenhouse and planted out. These have simply been kept in the pots. And as you can see, the roots are coming through the bottom. The pots are holding the plant back from growth. If they had been planted out in the greenhouse, they would have grown a lot more. I've held these back, of course, in pots because I'm wanting to put them out here, outdoors. But I still expect that these ones, which I have two varieties here, there is Legend and Sindel, will probably form the first fruit. Because the plants have started earlier as seed, they should come to fruit earlier. I can actually see on these as well the beginning of flower buds coming, so they're primed and ready to go. However, of the other plants, I've got a number of varieties here. I've raised all these from seed myself. There is this one, if I just check, yes, this one is LJ, which is a variety I've never grown before. LJ is named after a naturopath that lived in this area many years ago, Lester Jones. It's believed that he bred this variety of tomato. I have seen it as a tomato. I have not really tasted it or grown it. So it's going to be interesting to see what it's like. He developed this tomato, according to the story, as a tomato that he believed was more digestible, something that he saw some of his patients had trouble with tomatoes, and so I would expect something that's a little bit low acid, but we'll find out by growing it. You can see the colour difference in the leaf from these others, which this one is Purple Cherokee, and again a tomato variety that I haven't grown before but has been strongly recommended to me. So that's going to be interesting to experience as well. Now, behind me here I have 4 plants that I believe are Timmy Toe. I didn't plant these as seeds. I have taken these plants from volunteers from the location where I grew Timmy Toe last year. So I'm hoping that I'm correct on that. They are showing the correct signs that I'd expect. They're already putting out laterals, so that'll be interesting. Now down here I have Romas. Now I've grown these also from seed. They've been grown from seed that I kept myself from the previous year, and they're looking quite healthy and happy. Now I start them off indoors over the fire, as you've seen if you've seen previous videos. Once they get up to a reasonable size, I bring them out to the tube stock and group them together because I want them to develop some height so that I can plant them fairly deep. Now, I'm not including the film of preparing these beds because I have filmed that previously and it's in previous videos. If you want to go and look at it, you can pretty easily see what I have done. I rotary hoed this soil yesterday. It had been under plastic, which has kept it a little bit drier than it would otherwise be. I have created beds. I have put out my trellises and also put the irrigation, which is weeper hose, around. I always like to do that before putting the plants in because this type of construction is where you're likely to damage the plants. So if you get all that work done first, then you put the plants in and you have no great risk of doing any damage to young plants. Now this is the middle of October and I normally wouldn't put my tomatoes out until the end of October, so we're talking around 10 days to 2 weeks away. I've decided to do it now because the weather predictions are number one for rain coming tonight, a good rainfall which will settle them in nicely, but it's not cold rain. The temperatures that they're predicting are reasonably high, and after the rain, some really good high temperatures. So I'm looking at the next 2 weeks as not likely to be cold, likely to be warmer weather, and so I think why not start early? Now, if there was cool weather predictions, I wouldn't be doing this. However, here in Tassie, the fact that it's warm right now and I've decided to get them out doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. A couple of years ago, I put out my tomato plants in October as usual, at the end of the month, when the weather seemed quite acceptable. But November was actually pretty cold and they didn't move much until December. So you just don't know what's coming too far ahead. But these days with weather predictions, you're able to get at least a good idea of what's happening in the next week. And that's really all I need to do this. What I'm doing here today in planting is actually digging a bit more of a hole. It's slightly different to how I've done it previously. Digging a little bit more, I'm putting compost and blood and bone into that hole and then putting the plant in. Now I think it's a total of around about 33, 34 plants going out. So should give us a good tomato production. Now it's obviously going to take me quite a while to get these tomatoes planted and pretty boring for you to watch. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to let you watch some film that I took around about a week ago. However, in the last week I didn't get to edit that footage and to actually bring it to you. So I thought I'd include it into this film. So I'll bring you back when I've completed the planting. It's a lovely spring morning here in Tasmania, and I thought today I'd bring you for a little bit of a walk around the garden just to have a look at what's been happening, what we have done over winter, some things that we haven't filmed. The weather today is a little bit intermittent, sometimes sunshine, sometimes an occasional shower, a little bit windy. We have had probably 40 millimetres plus over the last couple of days, mostly at night thankfully. So the ground is pretty wet underfoot and it's really not possible to do much actual work in the garden. But we can go for a little bit of a show and tell tour. Firstly, here you'll see behind me these peppermint bushes, and Elizabeth planted those as an initial screen while the camellias here grow. They're a short-lived plant, but they do make a really nice and colourful display in the springtime. If I spin the camera around, you're going to see here some azaleas that we actually moved over the winter underneath this oak tree. These azaleas are much happier here than they were in their original location, which was on the far side of the playhouse where it would get quite hot in summer and dry out. Here under the tree, they're looking really nice, and we have other azaleas growing under the oak trees and they do quite well. So I'm certain this is going to be a much better place for them. Across here a little, there's a little job that I did. Now in this location it was really messy, and a couple of days ago I came in and cleaned that mess away. The problems at the moment are that I want to be able to come through here with the ride-on. It's a pretty wild ride around this corner, but if you have a look on the ground here, there is roots coming from the birch trees, and I need to come in with 2 or 3 wheelbarrow loads of soil to actually fill, and so that it's not a lump to come over, and that'll happen really next time I get the tractor out and can get some soil loose, and then I can bring it in. But generally speaking, it's looking quite nice here under the birch trees. There's some bluebells coming out. Also across the top of the cellar, Elizabeth has put in a lot of plants, and They're just starting to show some flower, but very soon they're going to look really, really nice. If we pop through this gate, you can see here the oats and wheat that I planted as a green manure crop. And I have been and scythed the oats off here at least once. It's really overdue for me to come back and do it again. In another about 4 weeks, I need to be planting potatoes in here. So I'm hoping the ground is going to dry sufficiently so that I can come in and cultivate and get those in. But this will probably get cut now and then again when I rotary hoe. So doing that gets some good organic matter into the soil. Swinging around, you can see the grass is really starting to grow in this area. The hazelnuts are looking really nice, and these kiwis where I pruned them are shooting out and looking great. Everything's looking happy. It's been quite damp, and so that really means that it's got a good start for spring. We come down here to the artichokes. You'll see they're actually coming through now, so they should jump out of the ground pretty quickly. I really need to come in with the hand mower and cut this a bit because it's going to become too tall very, very quickly. Otherwise it's going to be the size. It's just a bit damp right now to do that. Here's something that didn't actually go onto film. I planted here some berry plants that I found in the chook pen, and it's a thornless berry. I believe it's a boysenberry because I did have a thornless boysenberry. I found 3 plants, I've dug them up, put them here, and it's going to be really interesting to see what we get in terms of a crop. So coming back out of this section, we'll go and have a look at where we took down the cypress pine and how the birches that I transplanted there are going. So here you can see one of these birches, and you can see it's really doing quite nicely. The leaves have come out well. I did scatter some grass seed around, and that's come up well also. The other birch over this way was a little bit behind, but it's got leaves out now and looks quite happy. Other things like this rose that were more sheltered is looking very happy too, so we might actually see some flower off that this year. Now we've got this apple against the wall here that we espalier, and so it's got a much better chance now of setting more fruit. We've got apple blossom coming out everywhere. We'll go down the orchard in a moment. It's full of apple blossom. Put a few grafts around this winter. I'm a real novice in terms of grafting. Someone else offered to come and do it for me, but if you don't try, you don't learn. And it really, I don't think, is that difficult. So I've had a go here. There is some signs of growth, and some of the other grass we'll have a look at too. There's some signs of shooting there. So it's very early days, but hopefully we'll get some success. This particular graft here is a crab apple, which would increase the fertilization rate with the crab apple flowering on this as well. So let's head down to the orchard. It's really nice to walk down here this time of the year because there's so much apple blossom and everything has beautiful spring colours, vibrant greens. I really pruned the apples quite heavy this winter. I took quite a few branches out. They really needed it. We had way too big a crop of apples last year. But taking those out, I don't think will do a great deal to reduce the crop, because you can see how much flower there is on these trees, and there's a lot of good fruiting wood in the tree. So with more sun, more air flow coming through, it should actually give a better quality crop and less disease. Now, talking about those grafts, there is one here. It's got early signs of movement, so hopefully we'll get success on that. This one is a different apple variety. Apricots are a real hit and miss, I find, for us. They rarely set much fruit, and often when they do, it still gets blown off and has disease problems. This apricot tree has some fruit set on it, but I also see now that there is a couple of dead branches in here that I need to come and cut out. It wasn't as obvious when I was pruning that these branches had died. Probably gummosis, that tends to be the problem that gets in these and kills them. But we can be hopeful for a few apricots. Whether we actually get them in the end is really a good question. On this Granny Smith here is another graft that I have done, and you can see it's beginning to move. Next to it also is a waratah tree, and I really enjoy the waratahs this time of the year. They have such bright red and big flowers. It's really nice to have one in your garden. So I'll head down to the veggie patch, have a look at what's happening down here. I planted out one lot of cabbages and put pots around to keep the snails off. So that's the first of a successive planting that I'm trying to do this spring, and that's looking quite happy. I have the next lot still growing in the greenhouse, still little plants, and I'm overdue to put in the next lot of seed. So it might happen today, should have happened a couple of days, but I've been away. Everything is growing quite well here. There's a lot of work that needs to be done though, because the weeds are growing just as well as the plants. If we have a look here where I planted seeds, I think was the last video that I did, you can see the carrot seeds are up, and that's come up really well. Beetroot is coming up too, not quite as well as I had hoped, but maybe there'll be more appear yet. The chard is up, I will need to thin those. So lots and lots of weeds though as well, so I really need to come back and weed this. The lettuce that I've planted out is growing really well, and there's a couple of red Russian kale that I put out there. Also here the snow peas are growing fantastically now. They really need me to bring a string along and tie them up, otherwise the wind might start to get to them. I always try and plant on the wind side of the frame so it blows them against it, but as they've come up, they've gone the other side as well, so you still really need to come and tie them. There's still fairly large areas under plastic for later planting. All that's going to happen probably within 3 to 4 weeks. Coming into the greenhouse, you can see I've got some water on here. Regardless of the rain that's falling outside, you have to keep watering in the greenhouse because obviously it doesn't come. The only other real thing that I have done in here is I have put in some cucumber seed. Nothing has shown through yet. That was only probably a week ago. But I do have a failure in that you may recall in an earlier video I planted broccoli into this bed. And if you look, you can see where these plants are, but there is nothing come and growing. So what's happening, I believe, is it's caterpillars. They're cutting them off. So really I'm going to count those broccoli as a complete failure, that it just didn't work at all. The parsley plants I put out that I replanted are doing quite nicely all the way. So that's why in between those broccoli I've put in the cucumbers. The broccoli will just have to come out and the cucumbers will come up here in place of that. I've got some little broccoli plants ready to, or almost ready should I say, to go outside, and once they're ready that can happen. There's not a huge amount picking out of the garden, of course, this time of the year. There's this lettuce, which is providing us some nice salads. The only other major thing we're harvesting out of the garden right now is asparagus, and the asparagus has been doing really well, giving us regular picks. Sometimes you wonder whether it's worth growing asparagus, but when it's springtime and you're harvesting it, you'll really appreciate it and are certain of its value. So that's the last plant into the ground. Now, yes, it has taken me quite a while to get these plants in because of the process that I have done this time. My hope is with that compost in the ground like that, them planted deep, that they'll develop a nice strong root ball, a nice deep one, and withstand the dry summer better. Now, it's always really exciting to see the tomatoes in the ground like this, because this is the completion of that process that you started like 2 months ago or more, preparing things, and to actually see them out here and growing now outdoors, you know that summer is not far away and you start to get that expectation of getting some fruit. Of course, at this stage, I am going to move on in the next week or two to do a lot of planting in the garden, the more warm season planting that is. And so that's going to involve getting some pumpkin seeds in. That'll probably go into this section here next to me where the tomato beds were and last year. And also I'll be getting out some zucchini plants that I have got there. I'll also be planting climbing beans. They could go in, the seed could go in the ground now. It'll probably go after this rain because time probably won't allow for it. But I'll also then move within a couple of weeks' time to getting the summer crop of potatoes in. Also corn, hopefully some watermelons. So lots of planting coming in the next 2 weeks. Some of it within a couple of days. That will really see the summer garden in place and underway. Now with these tomatoes, I will come back and individually water these in, despite the fact that rain is expected tonight, because it just settles the roots and gets a tighter ball around them. Also, I will probably do a little bit of compost around them. That might happen after the rain, and then I'll come in with some form of mulch. Usually what I use is newspaper and straw. I'm not sure if I've got enough straw there this year. I'm a bit short on it, but I'll see what happens with that in the next week or two. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.